One of the most underreported stories of the Trump presidency is Trump's Middle Eastern peace plan at the Abraham Accords that has brought peace to Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain. Let's go to some footage right now. Roll.
After decades of division and conflict, September 15, 2020 was a historic day for peace. President Donald J. Trump brokered the signing of two peace agreements between Israel and Arab states, the first in more than a quarter century. They were between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and between Israel and Bahrain. Hello, I'm Christian James, a spokesperson for the U.S. Department of State in London, and this is U.S. policy on the Abraham Accords, explained. These two agreements normalized relations between these nations, establishing regional peace built upon shared interests, mutual respect, and friendship. 5 weeks later, the United States brokered yet a third peace agreement, this time between Israel and Sudan. Collectively known as the Abraham Accords, through these agreements, each country recognizes the importance of strengthening peace in the Middle East and around the world through mutual understanding and respect for human dignity and freedom. They also promote interfaith and intercultural dialogue in order to advance a culture of peace through cooperation. They acknowledge that the best way to address challenges is through cooperation and dialogue, and the importance of tolerance and respect for every person. And finally, they call for an end to radicalization and conflict by supporting science, art, medicine, and commerce to inspire humankind, maximize human potential, and bring nations closer together. Through the Abraham Accords, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan are setting aside their differences and pursuing long-lasting peace in the region. They are now establishing embassies, exchanging ambassadors, and cooperating as partners on a variety of issues, including tourism, trade, healthcare, and security. The Abraham Accords are a monumental step in creating more opportunities for establishing peace, prosperity, and stability in the Middle East. I'm Christian James, and this is the U.S. policy on the Abraham Accords, explained.
So I think it's, again, one of the most underreported accomplishments of the Trump presidency so far. Early on in 2017, President Trump gave his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, kind of the portfolio in the Middle East, and a lot of people scoffed at it. And you can go back, there's no shortage of articles there talking about how it's impossible, how there's no chance that someone like Jared could go and achieve this. And listen, the results certainly speak for themselves. You have a peace with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco certainly just recently added their name to the Abraham Accords as well. And so I think, after decades of what we saw was a stalemate in the Middle East, President Trump was able to, I think, kind of think outside of the box, delegate this to his son, to Jared Kushner, who was able to deliver. And I don't think there's any shortage. We have to recognize something. These states did not even recognize Israel's right to exist as a nation. And what this does is not only speeds up the recognition, the process, but allows them to work together to counteract and counterbalance what is the largest threat in the Middle East right now, and that's Iran, who extends their reach from Iraq through Syria and to Lebanon, and is looking to continue their reign of terror throughout the Middle East, and the militias and Hezbollah and these other organizations that they've supported. And what's amazing is that the Trump derangement syndrome is real. And no matter what the president has done, he was never able to get, and will never get, it seems, the credit that he deserves for the things that he did deliver on. And this, a major foreign policy win, where you are bringing people that have been fighting for millennia together to work together. And since the Abraham Accords were signed, it's amazing to see how quick the speed of Israel and the UAE and Bahrain are to work together to do business with each other. You're seeing them work together on defeating COVID. You're seeing them work together on security, regional security in the region. You're looking at them working in biotech and finance, and they're excited to work together. For any of us who have traveled over there, who have spent time over there, there was a real tangible excitement for them to work together. But unfortunately, it seems like the president can't get any credit when he delivers on something like this. But you really have to take your hat off to, number one, the nations that were able to put aside these differences, but certainly the president, who really, I think, when you look at the past 2-3 decades, there really hasn't been much progress in any sort of peace in the region. Quite the opposite. We've seen conflict after conflict, flare up after flare up. And what this does is it pushes other countries like Saudi Arabia to start to look to normalize relations with Israel as well. And so I think that ups the ante for these other countries as well to find a way. And I think it sets a precedent that there are ways to work through dialogue and diplomacy. And what's interesting is that we've heard a very different story from the president's detractors. He was going to be a warmonger. He was going to set off a massive war in the Middle East by taking out Iranian generals and terror leaders in the Middle East. And yet, what did we see? We saw a defeat of ISIS. We saw peace through a number of nations in the Middle East and North Africa. Quite the opposite of what everyone is, what people would like you to believe. I think most people in Hollywood, people in the mainstream media. But it's interesting how different the reality is from what we hear over and over again and what's pushed through the MSNBCs and the CNNs of the world. That you had a president who's bringing people who had literally been fighting for thousands of years, bringing them together and bringing peace in the Middle East. And that's something that we haven't heard a lot of. We've heard a lot about conflict. We've heard a lot about the bad things and what happened with ISIS taking over. But it seems like the president just can't get any credit, regardless of what he does. But I think that was something that was very interesting, something that we can be proud of here in 2020, one of the few bright spots. And so I think we have a lot to look forward to there. Moving forward, I think we're heading to the second half, an exciting second half of the show here, an exciting second hour with some good strategists, some political strategists that are going to give us some great insights into what's happening down in Georgia. We have a special election, a runoff for 2 Senate seats down there that's going to determine who controls the majority in the U.S. Senate. So we'll get to that when we get back after the break.